to me, that just seems like a recipe to get deeper into debt and then not make any progress.
If you are tired of living paycheck to paycheck, you have to make those hard choices. It's not going to be easy. You're completely changing a lifestyle and the way that you've lived for however many years, but you have to get on a plan if you actually want to make the changes to move forward.
You have to figure out which pain do I want to deal with more, the pain of staying here or the pain of getting out of here.
You have to approach this differently than you have in the past. Like, this time has to be different.
Welcome back to the show. Lauren and I are back for our weekly episode where we talk all things money. Lauren, I feel like one of the most common things I hear when I talk to people is that they're just feeling stressed about their money. And a lot of the times it's because they don't really know where to start with it. And, you know, I totally get that, because money is kind of one of those things where, like, you're not taught how to manage it. And if you don't know someone who manages their money well, like, there's really not an opportunity to learn it. For most people, this is something that they will either hopefully learn from their parents, and if not, like, they have to try to learn on their own. And if you don't have that opportunity, like, it's so easy to get stressed out, especially if you're in a bad financial situation. You have no clue where to start with. So I thought today would be a great opportunity to talk through some ways that you can deal with the stress you might have around money. And that's whether you're living paycheck to paycheck, you're trying to get out of debt, or you're just feeling anxious about expenses you might have in the future. So why don't we jump into it?
Yeah, for sure. So this one says, I'm tired of living paycheck to paycheck and I'm barely getting by. I feel like it's becoming harder and harder to stay afloat. I make a decent income, about $130,000 a year, and I've been cutting expenses where I can, but it doesn't seem to help much. Housing isn't the cheapest in my city, and I live in a 1-bedroom apartment close to work. I have some credit card debt, about $40,000. I also have 2 cars. One is paid off, and one I'm still making payments on, but I'm upside down, so I can't sell it. On the bright side, I do have excellent credit and take it very seriously. I'm considering getting a personal loan to hold on to it as a cushion and just making the payments with the funds from that while I find a second job to help me get ahead. At this point, I don't know how to get past the paycheck to paycheck life.
I feel like this is not the first time I've heard making 6 figures and still living paycheck to paycheck. And I thought the part that was kind of wild is he says, like, you know, I take my credit seriously and have an excellent credit score, but I'm $40,000 in debt and upside down on this car. And, like, it's just, on the one hand, it's just such a, like, I think can be an eye opener for so many people. Like, having a good credit score, like, has almost nothing to do with where you're at financially. Cause like this person said, they can have a great credit score and still be $40,000 in debt. But no, it's tough, you know, like, if you're in that paycheck to paycheck lifestyle, or not lifestyle, but like cycle, where you're kind of stuck, where because of the way that you've inflated your life, because of now the payments that you have, like this person said, the credit card debt, I'm sure there's a couple cards there, one car that you're still paying on, like, you kind of get stuck in this cycle where you're continuously paying for the expenses that were in the past, and therefore your income, you know, has to go towards that. But then you have current expenses. It just keeps on repeating itself. But yeah, what this person talked about at the end, like, I just don't think that's the solution, where they said they want to take out a personal loan, hold on to that as a cushion, and then just make their payments from that while they figure out how to get ahead. Like, to me, that just seems like a recipe to get deeper into debt and then not make any progress.
Yeah, and I might roast this person a little bit, but I'm not understanding why you have $130,000 a year and you live in a 1-bedroom apartment and you have all this credit card debt and you can't seem to make it. You can't get off of the paycheck to paycheck cycle. So I really need to know, like, how much is your rent? Like, are you living in San Francisco and you're paying like $5,000 a month? Because I don't understand why you can't afford to live a decent life with $130,000 a year. I don't think the math is mathing here for this, at least for me.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know the exact numbers on this, but I feel pretty confidently to say that, like, most places you can, you know, $130,000 a year, you can get by, you know, and not to say that costs haven't gone up, housing's more expensive, regular things that you have to buy every day, like, those things are more expensive, but like $130,000 a year, like, this person's probably taking home $7,000 or $8,000 a month. Like, how much are they spending on housing? And if that's really the big concern, well, maybe you can't live in a 1-bedroom apartment close to work, which I imagine, you know, that sounds like maybe you're living in a downtown area, you know, like, you have 2 cars, you can probably afford to move a little bit further out and drive in. But yeah, like, there's definitely more to the story here than just, I make $130,000, but things are just too expensive, and that's why I'm $40,000 in credit card debt.
Yeah, there's a lot more to the story, because I feel like if you're making $130,000 a year and you feel like you're paycheck to paycheck and you've cut everything you can, I don't believe you. I also think you need to do something about these cars. Why do you have 2 cars? This is why I'm just not believing it. Because like this person has 2 cars. Like it seems to me like you may have a little bit of a spending issue here. I feel like for the cars, one is paid off, still making payments on the other. I think I would like decide which car I really, really wanted to keep, and I would definitely sell the other one. I'm guessing the one that's paid off would be the easiest to sell it and then put that money towards the other one. Like you need to get the car, you need to get like away from this payment lifestyle. So do that. And then do not take out a personal loan to hold on as a cushion.
Yeah.
Build up an emergency fund. Like this would be quick for this person if they actually would be like buckle down a little bit, 1 to 2 months, build up a little emergency fund, and then just kill your debt and stop living above your means. Cause that's definitely what you're doing here.
Yeah, 100%. Like, and I feel like this is where like a really solid plan needs to come into place. The way that they've described their situation, they live close to work, they have these 2 cars, like they take their credit seriously. I don't know. Like to me, it just, I think that there is some spending issues going on here. And so my first step would be to like, one, audit all of your spending. Like, where's your money actually going? Because most people who say like, oh, like, I'm in debt because of my expenses or whatever, like, or that they think they know where their money going. Like most people who say that, like, it's just not the truth, and it's not necessarily that they're out here lying. It's just like, you just don't know until you really dig into the numbers and look. But from that, we can actually put together a plan of how you should spend your money on a monthly basis. Like if you're in this situation and you're actually tired of living paycheck to paycheck, right? Like there's people who do not enjoy it, but they're not willing to put in the work. But like if you're actually tired of this lifestyle, you want to get past it, like then there's going to be work, right? There's going to be things that you have to do. So one of those things is going to be sacrificing all of the extra spending that's going on, right? And so if you have a solid plan in your budget of here's where I need to spend my money on like, there's rent, there's your car payments, your credit card payments, there's gas, groceries, all that stuff. But then here's all the BS that I need to cut so that I can actually start making progress. Like, I don't know, there's a lot of people who are in bad situations, but it's almost like the situation isn't bad enough because they're not willing to put in the work to get past it, and I'm not saying it's fun. I'm not saying it's easy, but like you have to figure out which pain do I want to deal with more, the pain of staying here or the pain of getting out of here.
Yeah. And we've talked about this 1,000 times, but whenever you like inflate your lifestyle so much that becomes your norm, it's really hard to pull back the reins there. And my thing is for this person, they live close to work. Okay, if you want to live there and the apartment's expensive, get rid of both cars. You know what I mean? Like you don't need one. If you're going to be living that close to work, like why do you, that's the thing. I don't understand why they have 2 cars here, but yeah, like getting on a plan, because I think you're right. A lot of people will say that they'll throw out like, I have cut down as much as I can. And then you're like, okay, why are you still spending multiple hundreds of dollars eating out every month? Because obviously, you're not doing that. So this person, we don't know. Are they eating out multiple times per week? Like what does their discretionary spending look like? I think they think they're cutting it down, but they're probably not. They're probably not on like a specific plan. But you're right. Like if you are tired of living paycheck to paycheck, you have to, make those hard choices. It's not going to be easy. You're completely changing your lifestyle and the way that you've lived for however many years. And it's going to be hard, but you have to get on a plan if you actually want to make the changes to move forward. I think this person probably has a really good opportunity in front of them. They just haven't mapped it out yet, to actually see the numbers in play here and getting rid of one of their cards and then, or getting rid of one of their cars and then, making a plan to pay off that credit card debt and to stay out of it. I think they probably just have a messy situation right now,
Yeah. And like to speak to like, if they're living in a 1-bedroom apartment close to work, like you don't necessarily have to give that up. But like what I've seen just like in most cases, going from a 1-bedroom to a 2-bedroom, it's not going to be double the rent, right? It's going to be a little bit of an increase. But if you then get into a 2-bedroom and split that with a roommate, like now your housing costs, you've cut down on significantly, right? Like just finding ways that you can manipulate this as much as you can. Like, again, is that going to be the best situation? No, but you're probably going to have to go through a couple months, like 2, maybe to 6 months of like intense sacrifice to really get past that paycheck to paycheck. And then you have a little bit of breathing room, right? And then you can kind of set this up to like, okay, like I need to be able to stick to this plan for maybe six more months or another year or 2 years, right? So how can I set up this plan to where it's sustainable, but it's still like pushing me enough and making sure that I'm being accountable to what my goal is, which hopefully is to, get out of this debt, get the car situation figured out and actually get to a place where like, okay, I make a good income and my finances actually feel good.
Yeah. And I think, we talk about this all the time too. Like, what is your bigger goal here? Like why, just other than being tired, we hear that all the time. I'm tired, I'm stressed, I'm whatever, of living paycheck to paycheck, but what would be the on the other side of that, what would that look like for you? Why
Yeah.
would you even want to do that? Because, you know, this person, you know, making 130, like we probably know that they do have more money to use than they're thinking, but to pay off a car that they seem to still have owe on and then pay off that credit card debt, it is going to take some time probably to get them rolling. So what's on the other end of that that's going to make you stick with it? And I think you really need to focus on that to really be able to see some movement here to change your situation.
Yeah, that's a great point, because like the paying off the credit card debt, that can't be the goal. Like that has to be the journey to get to the goal, right? So what, like you said, what is on the other side of that? Like what is the thing that paying off the credit card debt is going to allow you to do, or not feeling stressed about your finances, or not living paycheck to paycheck? Like those things that you want to accomplish, like those might feel like the goals. And like, I'm not saying that those are bad goals. What I'm saying is like, those have to be the means that you hit your bigger goal. You know, like paying off the credit card debt is an awesome goal, but what is that actually going to allow you to do? I think that's, like you said, like if you don't start with what that goal is, like all this work feels like it's harder than it is. It starts to feel like it's nothing. It's like, it's not worth it in those moments when you like have low motivation. But yeah, why don't we move on to the next one then? So this person wrote, I'm overwhelmed and ashamed of our debt. I'm 41 and married with 2 young kids. I wake up every night at 3 or 4 in the morning, overwhelmed with guilt and ashamed of how I've allowed us to get into this hole. My husband and I make about $150,000 a year, but we owe $70,000 in credit card debt, $25,000 in personal loans from trying to consolidate, and $7,000 on a car loan. We've always had credit card debt, but it's always just been on a card or two and we'd eventually pay it off. Never have we been in a hole like this, and I am terrified. I'm trying to figure out how to get out of debt, and even started building up an emergency fund, but I've built it up and depleted it several times with emergency after emergency. We have a lot of the typical household expenses and a few streaming services for the kids. The only real spending outside of that is when we eat out on Friday nights as a family. I'm feeling so stuck and worried that we'll never get out of this hole. How do I get past the anxiety and shame and start making progress?
I feel like I have a lot to say about this, but I think the first thing that you have to do, like we could jump into everything we're seeing in this situation here and talk through it. But I think the biggest thing, especially someone who is waking up in the middle of the night and this is like all consuming for them, and you know, they're talking about the anxiety and the shame and all of that. I think that's something you have to almost come to terms with first, rather than like, here is the plan A, B, C, like this is what I need to do, because you can't get out of this bad situation if you're constantly like, you know, feeling that anxiety, that shame, that, you know, just all those negative feelings. It's just not going to feel good to make the changes that you're going to have to make, the big hard changes that you're going to have to make to get out of the situation. So I think for a lot of people, you know, I know a lot of people who are in lots of student loan debt, for example, and they just have so many regrets about, they wish they would have made different decisions, but it's like, hey, you're here. This is the situation. You can't change the situation. So you need to accept it where you're at. You made the decisions that you've made to get into this amount of credit card debt that you guys have, based on the information you had at the time. So just accept that was the information that you wanted to use, and that's where you're at. And now you have different information and you can move forward with it. You know, so I think that for me, it's never like, okay, you know, I could talk about a plan on this all day, but it's like, these people are not ready for it yet. They really need to like accept the current situation, know that this is not a good place to be, waking up at 3 and 4 in the morning, and know that they have opportunity to change here, but they need to like get their mindset right first. I'll start with that because I think there's a lot here, but I don't think it gets anywhere unless you really address that piece first.
Yeah, that's a really good point, because like, I feel for this person, you know, like 2 young kids, like you just feel all the shame to the point where you're waking up in the middle of the night and like stressing about it night after night. Like that's not a fun place to be, but also like, if you try to put a plan in place and this is how your life is going, like it's going to be so hard to actually make progress if every single night you're waking up stressed, if every decision is like shrouded in this shame and guilt that you're feeling. Like you have to find a way to get past that. And like you said, a big part of it is just, okay, I made these mistakes. This really sucks, but like now is an opportunity for me to learn. Now is an opportunity for me to put in some work and get past this, you know, like, and like it's a shitty situation. You're $100,000 in debt, but you're not like so far gone that you can't recover from this. Is it going to take time and a lot of sacrifice? Like absolutely. Right. But this is a situation that's still fixable. And I think for a lot of people, they feel like they're so deep in the hole that it's just not fixable. And then that puts them in this cycle of like, okay, well, I'm ashamed, I'm guilty, so I'm not going to do anything. And then I'm not doing anything, so I continue to feel more shame and guilt. You know, like you got to break that cycle first and get to a place where it's like, okay, like I'm ready to actually put in work. Otherwise, like no plan, no amount of like financial maneuvering, like it's not going to get you out of it. And like we can kind of see that happened here. You know, $25,000 in personal loans from trying to consolidate. Like you've tried to put a plan in place, and maybe it wasn't the best plan, but like you've tried to put a plan in place and it just didn't work because I don't think the mindset's ready to make progress. You know, you're not in the right headspace to move past this yet.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, you know, and then also under, you know, all the mindset stuff, but also understanding like you have to approach this differently than you have in the past. Like this time has to be different because like I was thinking the same thing as you. They've tried this before. It didn't work.
Yeah.
So now they're in a worse situation. They thought they were doing the good thing before. And we hear this all the time too, with people doing, you know, personal loans for consolidation, because there's no change there. It's a quick fix to pay off those credit cards, to get your one payment so that you can, and then you just rack up credit card debt again. This is very clear in this case. This is what happened here. But yeah, it's not going to be fun, but I do think that this person is in a place where they're like, they're ready to change, you know, like it's not, this isn't the guy before, I don't know, guy, whatever. You know, that seemed almost like not kind of there, like on the way, like tired, but this person's like terrified and they're ready to make the changes moving forward and hopefully approaching it a different way than they had before. Cause to me, I don't know. I think that they think that they're not. It says we have a lot of typical household expenses and a few streaming services. We only eat out once for the kids, but it's like, okay, well, where is everything going then? You know, I think that there's not a realistic, I don't know, outlook on things there.
Yeah. I was just thinking of like a good analogy. Like you're not going to get past your ex if you're continuously thinking about your ex, you know, like if you break up with someone and you're trying to move past them and maybe like start dating again, like that's not going to happen if you're still hung up on the same person over and over. It's the same situation here. You know, if you're still hung up on the past of what happened, how you got into this debt, I'm, you know, I suck. Like I'm so ashamed of myself. Well, how are you going to make a plan to get out of it then? Like you got to move past that. But like, yeah, I mean, there's, like we said in the last situation, like there's getting there mentally, there's being in the right headspace to make progress. And then once you're there, like the plan to get out of this is simple. It's not easy, but it's really like relatively simple for most people, most situations. It's like figure out what your income is, figure out what your expenses are, what should be left over if we like behave with our finances. Okay. And then let me give myself a little bit of wiggle room because it's probably unrealistic that I'm going to cut everything for the next 3 years, you know? So give myself a little wiggle room and then figure out like that sweet spot of how do we live in this phase of like, okay, it's not the most fun. It's a little uncomfortable. We have to say no to a lot of things, but we found that goal. We figured out how to get there. And now we're just making progress, you know, and then the motivation starts to kick in, right? But you got to have that plan in place as well to like fall back on so that way you can actually start making progress. Yeah,
for sure. And I think from this situation too, I also get the feeling that they're a little wishy-washy. They're not really holding true to what they've been doing in the past. And that's shown through multiple things here. The personal loans that they took out for consolidation, and now they're also in credit card debt. But also when they said that they built up the emergency fund multiple times and then drained it. What is an emergency to you? Because that our emergency fund is rarely touched. I think we used it. We've used it like one time. I remember at our old house, the pipe burst in our garage, and that was like an absolute emergency for us. You know, like we had to call somebody and pay. Like, of course, it was over a holiday weekend, so we had to pay like extra to get like the plumber to come out. But literally, there's water gushing into our garage, so like we had to do that. I think a lot of people, emergencies are not real emergencies. Like you're just making an excuse to use that money out of there. So I think that also needs to change as well. But it seems like this person is probably there, but you need to like hold steady to the plan, and you can't stray from it because you've found out how bad that affects you. You're now in lots of credit card debt, have personal loans out the wazoo, and no emergency fund with kids at home, which is a scary place to be, obviously.
Yeah, and I imagine like parents with 2 young kids, like the threshold for what qualifies as an emergency is probably a little bit lower, you know, like I don't think any parents wants to see their kid go through like something. And so like you said, like not necessarily that they're trying to find an opportunity to use that money, but like your threshold gets lowered when you have other people you're taking care of. But also like you said, is that a true emergency? Like what is your definition of an emergency? Because this is the thing you got to put in place first so you can actually start making progress, right? Like we always talk about, you set up a small emergency fund so that when life happens, you can have something to fall fall back on. But the goal is for that not to be touched, because if it does, you got to pause your plan and you got to fill that back up, right? And if that's happening over and over and over again, like you're never making progress, you're only just filling up the emergency fund, which is not going to solve the situation, right? If they're making minimum payments on 70 grand of credit card debt, they're going to be in this for 30 years, you know, and that's just not, you're not going to get out of it.
No. And I think I think you have to have some type of, depending how old your kids are, you should be able to talk to them a little bit about this. Like, for example, when they said they eat out on Friday nights as a family, I think that's totally fine. If it's planned out, it's, good to go. You set your expectations with the kids. And I also think to tell your kids, like, hey, just so you guys know, like, we're going to be doing this only on Friday nights. Like, we're not going to be stopping after soccer practice or whatever to go to McDonald's or whatever. Like, this is what we're going to do as a family because we have some things we're working on. I don't think you need to scare them about your situation, but setting those boundaries, because once you build up your emergency fund and you have that sitting there, it could be a little tempting to want to use that for things like that. But at the same time, once that's done, the rest of your money for quite a little bit of time is going to be going towards your credit card debt and paying off your personal loans to get that stuff out of the way. So you're not going to be able to be wishy-washy with this money and, doing whatever you want with it, or, the kids want to do this, so you fell into it. You have to set the expectations and really hold steady to it if you want your situation to change. If you want to end up here again, you can do that, Not saying that that's what's happening, but like you said, I think the threshold's a little bit different whenever you have a family.
Yeah. And like, to be fair, like I get it. Like the eating out once a week, like it doesn't sound like it's that big of a thing, but like if you have four people eating out at a restaurant, like you're easily spending $100, if not more, every single week, like there's room for progress, like, right. Like, and like, I can even just think like, all right, like last week I had some family visiting, we ordered pizza from this place down the street. It's like $60 to order pizza and have it delivered. Right. But if we had decided to go to like the store and buy like the pre-made dough and some ingredients, right, now it's like $15-$20, right? Yeah. Like, there's still ways like I always like to find a way, like, all right, like I'm not saying you have to cut all the fun out of your life, but like, can we find ways to like pivot the fun a little bit, and still make it enjoyable? And like, dude, if you got 2 young kids, having them make their own pizza is going to be a blast, right? Yeah. Like finding ways to pivot the things that you're already doing into a more affordable option. It's not that big of a sacrifice, especially if on the other end of that is getting out of debt, being able to provide for your kids even more into the future, and like, and with kids too, it's like, dude, like most parents or a lot of parents have their kids in like expensive sports and all these extracurriculars. And like, those things are awesome, right? Like I did that when I was growing up, I played baseball, I played football, like that was awesome. Right. But like, if it's between that and then taking care of the financial responsibilities as a family, like some hard decisions have to be made.
Yeah, for sure. And I feel like this is a given, but they can't use credit cards anymore. This is not a sustainable thing for them. They have to get, again, we talk about this all the time. We can say it over and over, but they have to get on like a very planned, well thought out, planned out budget that's going to be using their $150,000 a year income together, but it won't include putting things on credit cards anymore. Like I feel like at this point, when you have 70,000 in credit cards and 25,000 from consolidated debt, which is probably credit cards, you don't have you have $100,000 almost in debt there from credit cards, So I don't think that they need to be using those right now. Get on a strict plan, stop using your credit cards. You're only using your debit cards from now on. And then, set expectations with your family of what you want and what things to happen. And like you said, you might have to adjust your lifestyle for a little bit. But if you want your life to be radically changed in 2-3 years, this is the plan you need to do.
Yeah. You want radical change, you got to do something radical, right? Like
100%, Nick. And not many people want to do the radical change that it takes to get there. So yeah. All right, well, let's move on to the last one here. So this one says, my financial situation is objectively great. So why am I still stressed? I'm a 24-year-old guy who's managed to build his net worth to about 100K. I make a good salary, have no debt, and minimal bills. Rent is in a low cost of living area with my fiance, and most months we can save between $1,000 to $2,000. You may think every day is bliss, but I'm actually gripped by constant stress around money all the time. I'm stuck between thinking we don't make enough, we're spending too much, we've spent too much in the past, or we'll spend more in the future. I agonize over purchases big and small, no matter how badly I may want or need them. I don't think I've truly made a guilt-free purchase in my life. 2025 has felt rough financially for me. We're planning our wedding. I've had car troubles and tons of birthdays between friends and family, which is one area I don't cheap out on. It led me to always feeling tense, getting a flash of stress when I have to pay for something, and constantly rethinking every expense. How do I get past this?
This is a good question because it's not the typical like financial money stress that you think of, right? Most people think of financial stress and associate that with a bad financial situation, but there's a lot of people who have just like anxiety around money, even like regardless of what the situation is, and that could be a good or bad situation. Like a good example of this, like my wife was very similar to this situation, you know, especially like we paid off our debt, we were saving to buy our home, like we were in a very similar situation where like you know, like expenses weren't crazy high, we were making good money, and we were able to save money on a monthly basis, but like still there's that stress around spending money. And I, you know, Lauren, you say this all the time, but like it was really true in our situation. Like a big part of it is probably how you grew up, you know, like was there just constant money stress in the house? And that stuff tends to stick with you because now you associate stress with money and money with stress. And that can be true independent of whatever your financial situation is. And I feel like in situations like these, like you almost have to like force yourself out of it. You know, like you're not going to become comfortable with spending money until you force yourself to become comfortable spending money. And the way you force yourself to become comfortable with something is like you do it over and over again, right? You do it even when, you know, it feels like it's the wrong decision, but if you're in the back of your mind, you know, something can be the right decision, but it can still not feel like it's the right decision, you know? I feel like this person needs something to fall back on to where they can still gauge, like, am I hitting the goals and the metrics that I need to hit while like having a dedicated amount of money almost in your budget monthly to say like, look, I need to get myself past this. And like part of that's going to be like getting okay with the idea of spending money on things that you don't need to spend money on. And then figuring out like, does this actually improve my life? You know, like finding a way to balance that in your head.
Yeah. These situations are so tricky because someone like this, you know, they could make it till they were 60 years old and have millions in retirement because they will based on where they're at right now. And they still would feel the same exact way. So like even having a big, huge amount of money is never going to change how you feel about it. Like you have to start implementing that right now. You hear that all the time with like, I think like people like, I don't know about the FIRE community, but the people who have a lot of money, like high net worth, they're still worried about berries at their grocery store, or, you know, they're like, once I get to this number, everything's going to be good. And then they've been at that number for a very long time and it's not good. And they're still stressed and everything. So it's like, you're right. You have to almost figure out like how to get there while you're still going through this journey. But I can tell you right now, a 24-year-old with $100,000 net worth, maybe, I don't know, but I would assume, I'm going to say that's probably not the case most of the time for 24-year-olds.
Yeah.
Students coming out of college have most likely have a negative net worth at that point. I don't know. They need to work on this because I don't want them to get to 60 and still feel this way. But I think you're right. I think they almost need to like take a certain amount of money, whatever it is per month. They're doing great. I think you're doing just fine. Take that little bit of amount of money, whatever you want it to be. If you want it to be $200, $300, and say, this is guilt-free and I'm not going to think about whenever I'm spending this money from my budget, you know, and just starting small. You don't have to be like, yeah, I'm going to go below $1,000 a month. Start small. Even if you want to start 50, $100 or something like that, get that muscle going. This person needs to almost work backwards a little bit. We often want people to work that muscle to get, you know, better with tracking their expenses, budgeting and stuff. This person needs to walk it back a little bit because you're 24. Go out and have some fun, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, 100%. Like there's a point where you can overanalyze a situation and it's making the situation worse, you know? But that's exactly what my wife had to do. Like and this was before we were married. She was like trying to figure out how to like remove the stress around money. And I'm like, dude, like you paid off your debt. We're saving to buy a home. Like there's no need to feel stressed. And so if you're feeling stressed, like you got to find a way to work through that. And like literally in her budget at the time, there was a line item that just said like money I have to spend. And it was like you said, it was like $200 or $300. And in this person's case, if you're saving $2,000 a month and now all of a sudden you're saving $1,800 a month or $1,700, like you're going to make tons of progress towards your goals. And the benefit of that is you're going to find a way to like start spending money in a way that one, you can actually enjoy your life a little bit more, but two, you can come to the realization like I can still hit my goals and enjoy life a little bit and spend money on things that like I don't need, you know, but that's also why like it's so important to have a plan, like a budget in place, because that's, you know, my wife could see like, all right, I'm hitting all these goals. I'm staying within budget in all these areas. So if I spend this money or if I don't, like regardless, like this other stuff is still moving in the right direction, you know, and you kind of have to like, you kind of have to just trust the process a little bit and realize like, all right, like it's like, you know, there's this like, you have to find this balance between like trusting the process and still being nervous, you know, and then getting to the other side and realizing, all right, like that was okay. You know, so maybe it's not going to be a month of doing this and you're cured, right? Yeah. Like it's probably going to be like 6 months or longer of trying this and realizing like, okay, over the last 6 months, I have still made a ton of progress and it was okay that I actually spent that money. So, you know, you kind of start to connect those dots a little bit.
Yeah. I like what you said there about like 3 things can all like exist at the same time, you know, like you can budget, you can be on track financially, and you can also spend like however you want with this little pot of money that you've set aside. And I also think about, you know, they're talking about we're planning our wedding and all this. And I'm thinking, if you're like, I know it's really hard at like 24 to think this far ahead, and even for me now, but like when you're 50 years old, 60 years old, when you look back at your wedding, do you want to be thinking about the stress that it caused based on money that you had, and you're totally fine? Like, you need to think about like the bigger picture here. Like, is that what you really want to be focused on? The money aspect of your wedding rather than like enjoying your spouse and like the experience with them? I don't know. I think a lot of people are wrapped up in that and can't view the bigger picture there, but that's what I also think about for this person.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I think like at the end of the day, like if you can identify the areas of your life where you're like, okay, like these are my goals. These are the things that are important. Like, all of these things can always break down to like a money side of it, right? Like whether it has to do with your finances or not, like everything's going to be tied into money somehow. Like, can I figure out what the money side of it is? And can I work that into the plan on a monthly basis? Like, I know for me, like knowing that, okay, like, and this was early in my financial journey, knowing that my emergency fund was being built, knowing that I was making progress towards these different goals, like by saving in these different sinking funds, like that gave me a lot of reassurance that like, okay, like even if I don't feel like the needle is moving enough, like things are being in, like work is happening, you know, like progress is being made. And so it's a way of like sitting back and looking at the plan that you've set in front of yourself and like, all right, as long as I keep following this plan, like I can allow myself to give up that stress and that nervousness or that anxiety, you know, like put all of that weight of those emotions like onto a good solid plan and let that carry the weight, you know, and then as that continues to work, you can realize like, okay, like this plan is allowing me to live like guilt-free. It is allowing me to live without feeling stressed or nervous. And then, you know, like you said, like if you built in the opportunities to spend money, like now you're going to start to associate that with like no stress, you know, and that's, you kind of have to just build these opportunities for your mind to connect the right kind of dots to where you're not stressing about money anymore.
Yeah. And I think this person, you know, I'm sure that they have sinking funds. I'm sure they have a huge emergency fund. They probably have all these different funds that they need. But it's like, okay, what in your mind, what's worst case scenario is going to happen? Think about that. Like, is it that bad? How long could you actually survive if you did lose your job or something, you know, and you were at your worst case scenario, you lost your job, you have nothing. You have all these funds now, you know, you have your emergency fund, you have your sinking funds. How long could you live off that? And then probably by the time that would end, you have a new job already. So like the worst possible scenario is probably not that bad for this person. Now, that first person we had that had no money in savings, it would be really bad for them. But for someone like this, relax. Like you're going to be fine, even if your worst case scenario does happen, you know? And like you said, start building up that muscle of spending that little bit of money each month, totally guilt-free, and using it for whatever you want. And there's no feelings around that money. It's just money, and it's just a transaction that you're going to do, you know? So that's kind of what I thought about there with like, you know, think about your worst case scenario. It's probably not that bad for this person, so you're going to be okay.
It's so funny that you mentioned that, because that's like the exact conversation we had when we were like we were in like the last couple of days of like, all right, this is like, we can back out of buying this home, or like, are we going through this? Or even like right before we submitted our offer, it's like, are we really doing this? And like, you know, it's an emotional process, right? Like, and you're putting down a huge chunk of money, and you're committing to this monthly payment every single month for the next 30 years, knowing that it's probably going to increase a little bit with like property taxes and insurance, right? And it was like, okay, like let's actually look at our numbers and like, let's take a step back. Like, what is the worst case scenario? You know, like, okay, you lose your job, I somehow can't make money anymore, like we're fine for like at least a year. And to think we're not going to make money at all throughout that, you know, like, and then you can start to think like, all right, we're probably going to not make nothing. And so that pushes that year to like a year and a half or 2 years or whatever it is, right? Like for a lot of people in situations like this, you like you said, look at what is actually the worst case scenario. And it's probably not that bad. And so maybe you're just carrying all the stress for no reason, you know, like, and that kind of frees you up to make a decision that under all that stress you might not have made.
Yeah. And this isn't easy. This person's not going to change next month, but I think you have to start thinking a different way and start making these different choices that's going to lead you in that direction. Because I truly don't think you want to live your rest of your life like this. You'll probably drive your wife crazy.
Yeah. 24 years old, 100K net worth. Like he's doing fine. This couple is going to be very wealthy in the future. Like they just got to not get in their own way of that, you know?
Exactly. Yeah.
Cool. Well, I think that wraps up today's episode. And as always, if you enjoyed it, you found some value out of it, the best way you can help us grow is by sharing this with a friend and subscribing.
Yeah. And if you want to have your money question answered on the show, you can visit our website, justanothermoneypodcast.com, and click the submit a question button. And don't forget to join us for another episode of Just Another Money Podcast. The information, opinions, and recommendations provided on this podcast are for entertainment purposes only and do not constitute professional financial advice. Any financial decisions you make based on the content of this podcast are your responsibility. We strongly recommend consulting with a licensed financial advisor or other qualified professional before making any significant financial decisions. By listening to this podcast, you acknowledge that we are not liable for any financial outcomes.